mother, if you want to be a good wife, a good athlete, a good musician, a good teacher, if you want to be a good doctor or a good lawyer or the best salesman, you have to be willing to go the extra mile. You have to be willing to do it. Those things are so key and so important. And the key takeaway for you and I this morning is this. When I give more than what is demanded, then I will get more than what I deserve. I'll say it again. Key takeaway. When I give more than what is demanded, then I will get more than I deserve. Now that's a principle that you know I can change. We can't change it. Now the irony of it is that most people spend their entire life trying to figure out how to do less, how to contribute less, but yet they want the maximum gain. It goes against the natural order of things. And what happens when you spend your life doing the minimum, contributing the minimum, you're going to find yourself spending your whole life just hustling. You're going to find yourself going from bad to worse. And then one day you're going to wake up like Rip Van Winkle. After 20 years, you can ask yourself, what happened to my life? Remember old Rip went up the mountain? And he stayed up there 20 years. When he went up the mountain, he had a picture of King George on the wall of England. When he came down, he had a picture of George Washington, President of the United States. So Rip sort of slept his life away. When you spend all your life trying to hustle people, when you spend all your life doing as little as you can do, you're going to find that you're going to wake up one day and you're going to say to yourself, what happened to my life? Because what you're doing goes against the natural order of things. It goes against the natural order. You see, when you look at things in high definition excellence, you're looking at things from God's perspective. You're looking at things the way God looks at it. And when you look at things the way God looks at it, you're going to find that high definition excellence makes you a better person. It makes me a better person. Now, what Jesus does for us in Matthew 38, these are some of the most unusual and maybe some of the most controversial words he ever uttered. And it's hard to swallow them when you look at it in the flesh. So I want to sort of warn you. When you look at this in the flesh, it's kind of hard because what Jesus is telling us, it cuts against the grain. It cuts against our human nature. And the second thing is, it's not the advice that most people will give you. What Jesus is telling us, he's describing for us is a life of excellence. And if you want a life of excellence, he's saying, if you want a life of excellent results, you got to give excellent effort. If you want a life of excellent results, you got to give a life of excellent efforts. Look what he says to us. Now we're going to break this down because oftentimes this is a little bit misconstrued. And I want you to look at it from this perspective. Excellence means going farther than what's required. Doing more than what's required. Look what Jesus said. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, look at Matthew 5:41. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Well, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? It goes against the natural brain. It goes against what people would normally tell us. And that's where we get that phrase from, going the extra mile. So what Jesus is telling you and I is that you got to put a little bit more into it. Now, what does he say here? Some of us will remember that the Romans had conquered most of the known world. And the Romans did something that nobody else had ever done. They built this massive system of superhighways, much like our interstate system, through every country that they conquered and every territory. And the Romans had over 50,000 miles of roadways throughout the entire empire. Now, some of us may recall from Bible study that Israel was one of these occupied territories. It was controlled by the Roman Empire. Now, there was a law that Rome had that agitated and embittered the people of Israel, the Jews. And this was a law that any Jewish soldier could compel a Jew to drop anything that he was doing at any moment and make him carry his weapon, his knapsack, or any burden that he wanted him to do for at least 1 mile. Now to us, that sounds like a crazy law. But that was a law that existed. And so the soldier, in effect, had the right to draft you and force you to do whatever he wanted you to do for at least a mile. And so you had no choice but to do it. Now to the Jew, this was utter humiliation. It was something that they hated because they were forced to carry somebody else's burden. So what Jewish boys were taught in that day is that they were taught to figure out how far from their house was exactly 1 mile. So that boy would walk a mile, and he knew exactly from what was 1 mile from his house. And the parents sort of trained him that. So if the foot soldier or any Roman soldier asked him to do anything, he would know that he only had to go so much of a distance. Now to you and I in the flesh, that seemed logical. And what he was training that child to do is to do only that which is required. And it seemed like it made a whole hell of a lot of sense. And what the question I ask myself today, are we teaching our kids to only do what is required of them by the things that we get them to do and the positions that we're putting in? Are we crippling these kids from our bias? Because what happens is that these Jewish kids would only do the minimum that was required as it relates to that particular law. And I told you, like Mariana had a 3.7 grade average, and we want to commend her. There are parents who allow their children to come home with C's. And that become a mindset for that child that it's okay for you to be average. And what happens is that we have to ask ourselves, do we want our kids to get a minimum grade today so they can get a minimum paycheck later? So they can get a minimum opportunity later? Or do we want to teach them that they need to learn how to push harder, push farther, and they need to learn how to do the extra mile? I'm reminded of a mother who sat down with her little son at dinner, trying to get the little kid to eat some spinach. And the boy said to his mother, "How little can I get by with?" The kid ever ask you that? "Dad, how little can I get by with?" "Mom, how little can I get by with?" You see, the getting by attitude is what the Jewish people taught those kids. Just to do the minimum that is possible. Once you walk 5,280 feet in 1 foot, don't do any more. You've done your duty. You've done what's required of you. That's it. Can you fundamentally imagine what a bombshell it was when Jesus said in that day? That's why you got to take these things in its context and its context. When Jesus said in that day, whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Just think how radical that was. Just think how different that was. Just think how out of the box was. Just think how crazy that sounded to those Jewish people. Man, you got to be kidding. You're asking me to go the extra mile, to do more than my duty, to do double my duty? What Jesus was saying to them, that I realized how important going the extra mile is. I realized that how important it is not just fulfilling your duty. I realized the significance that the second mile makes. You know, most athletes that have been successful will tell you that they became successful when they learned to do the extra mile. Most lawyers will tell you they became better lawyers when they learned to do the extra mile. There was a book written about Tiger Woods, who's probably the greatest golfer in the history of golfing. He's known all over the world, and it talks about his victories. And in 2001, Tiger Woods was forced into a 3-hole playoff. He ended up winning that and becoming the PGA champion. What you don't know is that Tiger Woods got on his jet, he flew back home, and the next morning he got up at 6 a.m. and hit golf balls for 8 hours. You see, Tiger Woods knew that he had to go the second mile. He had to prepare himself And he had to realize that going the second mile isn't a burden. Listen to what I'm saying. Going the second mile isn't a burden. Being able to go the second mile is a blessing. Tiger Woods knew, I won that PGA championship in that playoff and those 21 holes because I learned early to go the extra mile. So I'm going to go and prepare myself in case I have to go an extra mile later on. And that's why it's so important for you and I to understand what Jesus was telling them about that extra mile. Do more than what's required of you. And as believers, if all of us would take the time and do more than what's required of us, we would be able to stop complaining about a lot of things that happens in our lives, that happens in our country, that happens in our state, that happens in our community, if we would just take some of the quality time that God gives us. We ask Him for 24 hours. Do you realize that? You only ask God for 24 hours. Give us this day. Since the last time we were together, God gave each and every one of us 168 hours. And did you take the time to ask yourself, did you go the extra mile to do anything that glorified God, to do anything that made you a better person, to do anything that made somebody else a better person? So Jesus is telling you and I, we need to be able to go the extra mile in every aspect of our life. We need to be able to go that second mile. Going that second mile makes all of the difference. And it just never ceases to amaze me. And we don't even go the second mile in giving offering and tithes in the church. We give the minimum that we could give at every offering. Look, I wasn't always behind this pulpit. I wasn't always into God's Word. I spent a whole lot of time in the world, Brother Jones. A lot of time. I did a whole lot of things. I always use Brother Jones. He said I could use him and I telepathically connect. So he don't mind me using it. But I used to be in this world. I'm still in the world. But I pray each and every day that the Holy Spirit guide my decisions now. That's the difference. When I was dealing, man, and I was running, I used to talk to guys. Let me tell you something. I've seen guys who give a woman $1,000 just for the possibility of going to bed with them. Yeah. But yet they won't give their child $50. Or they'll put $1 in the church. Or they'll fuss at their wife for putting money in the church. But they'll give a woman $1,000. And I tell you even worse story than that. Deacon Charles can tell you we had an associate. This dude took the position, hey man, when I'm in a room with a lady, all the money in my pocket, whatever I throw up that sticks to the roof is mine. Whatever that hits the bed is hers. I'm just telling you the kind of sick stuff that goes on out there. So I'm just trying to show you that there are times when in our lives we need to be able to go the extra mile. And I want you to be able to relate to this. That's what I'm sharing with you. You see, if I don't tell you these things, you say, oh man, Pastor Jones off the reservation. I'm telling you what I know. We'll spend all of our time and resources on outside people and little time or resources on the people that we love. And then we ask ourselves, we won't even open the door up for our wife. The wife won't even run the husband bath water today. And you ask him to cook some food for you. Don't you know how to cook? I'm saying we won't even do the little bitty things that go the extra mile that makes a difference. And what I'm saying to you that if you want to be rewarded, if you want to be blessed, you've got to be able to go farther than what is required. We've got to stop this minimum effort expecting maximum gain. You see, excellence means giving more than what you deserve. You got to give more than what you deserve to get more than what you deserve. Look what Jesus tells us. And I want you to see this because these verses are impactful if you let them impact you. Look what he says in Matthew 5:38. I just want you to see it. And we don't look at this way. But this morning I want to look at this way with you. Look what he says. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, watch this. This stuff is revolutionary. This stuff goes against the natural kind of thinking. You can't read this and say, man, this dude Jesus, man, something wrong with him. Yeah, when you're in the flesh. But when you're in the spirit, You understand what Jesus is trying to take you from, too. Watch this. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If he wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your tunic also, or coat. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Now, there's a lot in that. I mean, there's a lot packed in there. And let's sort of look at it. And what Jesus is doing here for you and I, in these tough verses, what he's doing for you and I, and these are some of the most difficult verses in the Bible. What he's telling you and I want to show you how to get that second extra mile mentality. I want you to have that second mile mentality. That second mile mentality is going to put you up and above everything else. Because I'm a God that loves you. I'm a Father that cares for you. I'm a God that shows you mercy and grace. I'm a God that wants you to have everything that you need and prepare you for the things that you want. So he's saying that in order for me to get you where you need to be, you have to develop a second mind mentality, a second mile mentality. Now let's look at it. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. Whoever slaps you on the cheek, turn the other one to him also. Think about that. The most insulting thing a person can do in that day is slap you. The second most degrading and dehumanizing thing that a person could do was to spit in your face. And Jesus is saying to you and I, if a person slaps you, turn the other cheek. Now just imagine, that goes against everything. If somebody slaps you, you're going to slap back. What Jesus was saying is, no, don't do that. Even in that day, what Jesus is saying to us, that the most humiliating thing, the most dehumanizing thing that a person could do in that day, and some people think it's the day too, was to slap you. He's saying if they slap you, turn the other cheek to them. Now that's radical. That's real radical. Anybody ever seen Bill Cosby have this program that have all the little kids on? And kids can say some fascinating things. Yeah, kids say the darndest things. Thank you, Sister. And one day he was talking to a little boy, and the little boy's name was Peter. And he said to Peter, do you try to do the things Jesus told you to do? Well, that's something like a parent would ask. Peter said, well, Jesus hasn't told me nothing. So Cosby said to him, what about if somebody hit you on the other cheek? What would you do? Peter says, well, that sounds mean. And Cosby said to him that, really what this means, Peter, is that you don't hit him back. So Peter sort of looked at him kind of strange, and he said, Mr. Cosby, that don't seem to be too smart to me. And Bill Cosby looked at him and said, look, what Jesus is telling you and I, the whole point behind it is that you have to be bigger than the other person. Remember how our parents used to tell us, you got to be bigger than the other person? So Peter took a moment at it and looked at it and said, well, now that makes sense. If you're bigger than the other person, then hit him back. And so what Jesus is telling you and I, out of the genius of mouths of kids, he's telling you and I that we need to learn how to not to retaliate to everything that someone says or someone does. You don't have to retaliate on everything that someone says and someone does. Sometimes it's good just to listen. And sometimes it's good not to react in emotion. Sometimes it's good just to step back. You know, it's not always bad to get a little humiliation. Sometimes in humiliation we grow. Sometimes in humiliation we can step back, we can think about it, we can ask the Holy Spirit for guidance, and the Holy Spirit can give us a whole different interpretation of a thing. So sometimes we need to step back. And what Jesus is telling you and I, he's saying, don't return evil for good. That's what wicked people do. He's telling us we need to learn that we shouldn't be just about returning good for good. That's what normal people do. What Jesus is telling you and I is that we need to learn how to return good for evil. And the only way we get there is through the second mile. Understand what I'm saying to you? Anybody can do to people what they do to them. Anybody can take charity and turn it into something bad. It takes a unique person to say, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of what you're saying, I'm not going to allow you to bring me where you are this day or no other day, because this is where I'm at in my relationship with Christ, and this is where I'm in my relationship with everybody else. That's not easy to do. So Jesus is telling you and I that we need to develop this second mile mentality. Now look what he says in verse 40. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him also have your coat. Radical. That's radical. Let me just tell you how it's radical when we take it in its context and context for that time. If a person sued you during that day, if he didn't have the money to pay the judgment, the court ordered you to pay him in clothing. Yeah. You have to give him your clothes. So Jesus is saying to us, you give the man not just your clothing, but your coat. Now why is that significant? Because our coat was one of the most significant garments that we had. It acted as a blanket, and it acted as shelter for you and me. So Jesus is saying, not only give him your shirt, understand this in this context, but also give him your coat, give him your shelter, give him your cover if you lose the lawsuit. What Jesus is saying, go the extra mile. If you lose this lawsuit, and that person isn't satisfied, and they still have some bitter, and they still have some hard feelings, Jesus is saying, if you want to reconcile that relationship, give them your coat too. Give them the thing that keeps you warm. Give them the thing that gives you shelter. Those are radical kind of thoughts, man. But he's telling you and I, it's better to give all this up. Listen to me. It's better to give up all these worldly possessions and save that relationship and reconcile that relationship than holding on to those earthly possessions. And what he's telling us is that when we give more than what's required in a relationship, it builds our integrity. When we give more than is required in a relationship, we say to that person, you are more important than my material possessions. Understand that? Well, Jesus is telling us this stuff is radical. And now look what he says in verse 42. These verses are designed to change the way mankind thinks. These verses are designed to put you on a whole nother level. They're very impactful. And when Jesus, look what he says to us. Give to him who asks, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Now what Jesus is telling you and I want to clarify this. If a person has a real, genuine need, then give to them. If they have a real, genuine need, then lend to them. And what he's clarifying for you and I, he's saying to us that we should be able to extend to people what they need at the time. We shouldn't be like banks. We shouldn't require you to have collateral. We shouldn't require you to give up your whole life. If a person is a believer and in a relationship with you, you should be able to extend to them that which they need if you have it. That's radical kind of thinking. He's telling us, give to him who asks. Don't turn away from him who seeks to borrow from you. A real, genuine request should never be turned down. A real, genuine, validated request in a true relationship should never be turned down. Jesus is giving us some radical affirmation here. And when he's telling, I remember, as I said, he's not telling you to give everything that they want. I remember my daughter turned 16 years old. She just popped up and said, Daddy, I want you to buy me a BMW. Yeah, just out of the blue. I said, Princess, it would be most deleterious for me to put you in a situation that compromises you out and provide you with this automatic transportation at this time because it's going to blow your mind. So she said, Daddy, I don't quite understand that. I don't get it. I said, that's exactly it. You're not going to get that. You see, that was a request of a want, not a need. That was a request of a want, not a need. Now, when she got into 12th grade, and it became obvious that her mom and I had to do something different, her mom decided that we should buy her Honda Accord. That became a BMW. That was a need. That BMW request was a want. Understand the difference? When a person has a genuine need, we ought to try to fulfill that genuine need. And when a person asks us to borrow something, we need to be willing to go the extra mile. We don't need to be like a bank that requires them. See, banks help people who don't need help. You ever notice that? A bank won't loan a person money who really needs money.
Right, right. That's right.
They're only going to loan you to somebody who has 3 or 4 times more collateral than they're loaning to. And we try to implement banks in our way of helping people. And when Jesus is telling you and I through this illustration, we need to learn how to go the second mile. We need to learn how to be the best that we can be. We need to learn how to prepare ourselves, and we need to learn how to put ourselves in good strategic position. And he's telling each and every one of us that when we go the extra mile, we're going to develop a sense of excellence that's going to get us more than what we expect. Now, some of you are saying, Pastor, that sounds good in theory. I understand the concept of going the second mile, but really, how does that benefit me? What happens to me when I go farther than what is required and I give more than what is demanded? Well, let's just talk about it. First of all, it's going to give you a better attitude. How can you say that, Pastor? Because the second mile is the character building mile. The second mile is when you build character. You ever heard a marathon runner talk about when he hit that wall? About when they almost finished, they hit that wall where they can't think, they can't see, they're just going through emotion. They have practiced and they have practiced and they have learned to go the extra mile. And that extra mile builds character. Now let's go back to the Jewish thing with walking the mile. You see, when you first have to walk that mile, the reason why Jesus was telling them to go the extra mile, because when the first mile was the slave mile, you had to do what the master told you to do. The second mile, that is the mile that builds you and lets you become the master. Because you've gone from doing something that you have to do to doing something that you want to do. See, that's what the extra mile does. The extra mile puts you in a position, you're doing that because you want to do it. You're not doing that because it's required or no one's making you do it. You're doing that because you say, I want to be successful. I want to be the best that I can be. So I'm going to go the extra mile. That's when the character starts to build. See the correlation Jesus is giving to us? I remember when I was running track, Coach Schofield, we used to call him Coach, wouldn't let you call him Schofield. He would make us run 5 miles. And then he would make us practice. And after practice, he would make us run 25 levies. And I would say, man, this man is crazy. He's insane. But he would just say, go! And we would just run up the levees like fools. But you know what that does today? When I run into a difficult situation, or I can't figure something out, after I prayed on it and I meditated on it, you know what comes back to me? One of those 25 levels. That if you just get into it, if you just do it, it's going to make you better. You see, we didn't have to run those 25 levels. But what those 25 levels did was it built character. It gave us something that we could draw on, and it stopped us from being the victim. And it made us become the victor. You see, the extra mile moves you from being the victim to making you the victor. The extra mile takes the Roman soldier out of control and puts you in control. You see, when you go the extra mile, you're the master. When you go the extra mile, you can smile, you can laugh because you have now taken control. And going that extra mile helps us develop our attitude and our character. And when we go that extra mile, it benefits us because it maximizes us. Nobody cares about the person that went the 1 mile. You know, when you see something extraordinary, when you see something great, that's a person who have gone the extra mile. Have you ever seen somebody that's successful at anything? See, you only see the mile. You only see what they had to do. You don't see the extra mile. You don't see the extra time. You don't see the extra effort. You don't see the extra commitment. And what Jesus is telling us is that if you sit at your job and watch the clock all day, you're not going the extra mile. What he's telling us is that in that second mile, that burden mile, that is where your blessing is. The blessing comes in the burden. The blessing comes in it makes your relationships better, not just with other people, with yourself. You see, when you can go that extra mile, you start to believe in yourself more. You start to say, I can do this. You start to say, through God, all things are possible. You start to say, I'm more than a conqueror. Those little things that are embedded in your subconscious mind, when you go that extra mile, they come out. You can perform. You can be better. You can do a lot more. You know, I tell my husbands, if your wife actually get the clothes out of the dryer, don't just get them out the dryer. Fold them up and put them on. You do more than was required. They appreciate that. They see it. You know, teenagers, you don't just straighten out your room when your parents tell you to clean up your room. You vacuum your room. You fix your bed. You fold your laundry. You put up your clothes. They're going to notice that. They're going to notice that you're doing more than what's required. You got to go to work. Don't go to work 10 minutes late. Go to work 15 minutes early. So you can take time to assess what's going on. So you can see who's calling, who you have to call back. Give yourself some time. We have to come to the realization that this minimum effort isn't good for a positive attitude. A minimum effort isn't good for a positive attitude. We got to get out of this. And Jesus is telling you and I, we have to develop this second mind mentality, this extra mile mentality. And finally, for you and I, the greatest benefit of the second mile is going to bed at night, and maybe even going to the grave, knowing that we have done our best. Just imagine when you go to bed at night, when you put your head on the pillow, that you can say to yourself, I did my best. You can say to God, I did my best. You can say, I went the extra mile. I did more than was required. And I dealt with the burden so I could deal with the blessing. You see, you got to deal with the burden if you want to deal with the blessing. Too many of us want to deal with the blessing and not deal with the burden. But those things come together. I'm reminded of a story of a doctor he was a famous surgeon. And if some of you see the programs on TV about doctors, you know that a person has to be an intern before they become a doctor. Now this particular surgeon was very meticulous. He was just world-renowned for what he did. And one day the young intern began looking at him, and he looked at how meticulous he was. And rather than tying 2 knots to close up the surgery, the doctor tied 3 knots. So the intern looked at him and he said, Doctor, can I ask you a question? He said, you followed the book to the letter. He said, the book said to do the incision this way, and you did the incision that way. He said, the book said to tie the veins this way, and you tied the veins that way. He said, when you finished the operation, the book said to tie 2 knots. The doctor said, that's right. And the intern said, as I noticed and I observed, you tied 3 knots. So the doctor looked at him and said, that's my sleeping knot. He said, every time, every day, I put someone's life in my hand. So when I go home, I redo in my mind every step of the operation so that I can see any mistakes that I made. Sometimes when I'm tired, and this is you and me, and I'm worried, I can't sleep. And I ask myself, did I do everything that I could do not to put this patient's life in jeopardy? And then I remember that I not only tied 1 knot, no, I didn't just tie 2 knots, but I tied 3 knots. And then I smile and I go back to sleep, because the 3rd knot is my sleeping knot. And what I want to say to you, as you go through life, you can have one of 2 mindsets. You can say, I'm just going to get enough, just do enough to get by. And that's what most people do. I'm just going to do enough to get by. Or you can ask yourself that you're going to take the definition that Jesus gives to us of a high definition excellence in Matthew 5:28. And I'm going to be the best that I can be. I'm going to go the extra mile because I want to go beyond the burden, because I want to experience the blessing. And Jesus said to you and me, if you're willing to go the extra mile, if you're willing to go beyond the burden, if you're willing to just do a little bit extra, then believe and trust in me that in that 2nd mile, you're going to receive the blessing. Do you want the blessing? Then you got to go the extra mile. You see, without doing the extra mile, there's no blessing. Because in that extra mile, you build character, you build integrity. In that extra mile, you know and you come to know that it's only God that brought you to it. Do you receive that message? I would be remiss if I didn't do what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. I'm going to emulate it. See, I can't open that door for you. Christ opened it 2,000 years ago. He opened that door 2,000 years ago for anybody who wanted to step through it. And he tells us, don't wait till tomorrow, because tomorrow may never come. Don't wait till an hour from now, because an hour from now may never come. If you have not professed Jesus Christ as your Lord, profess it with your mouth, and believe it in your heart, then you're not saved. I'll say it again. If you have not professed Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior with your mouth, and believe it in your heart, then you're not saved. And you don't know where you're going to be 100 years from today. But if you have pronounced Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior with your mouth, and you believe it in your heart, it is so simple that invitation should never be turned down. We extend that open invitation to you today. We extend that open invitation to you today. That's the invitation that nobody can take from you or nobody can give to you, because Christ gave it to you 2,000 years ago. You just have to accept it. If there's none, let us stand.